Good morning, colleagues. How exciting. We are going to be considering our first bill in committee. So we have with us our legislative clerk, Justin Vave, I think is your last name, right. Yes. And we appreciate his help. We also want to welcome our colleague Sven Spangeman, who brought forward this bill on Gender Equality Week. And so we'll begin with comments from Mr. Spangeman, and then we'll go into a round of questioning. You have 10 minutes. You may begin.
Madam Chair, distinguished members of the Standing Committee on the Status of Women, I thank you for this opportunity to speak on my private member's bill C-309, an act to establish Gender Equality Week. And it's a great honour for me to appear before you today, not only in my capacity as the Member of Parliament for Mississauga Lakeshore, but also because, in my view, this is a real opportunity to have a profoundly positive impact on Canadian society. Before elaborating, Madam Chair, I'd like to take a moment to thank my team here in Ottawa and in my constituency for their dedicated work in bringing this bill to where it is today. Adrian Zita Bennett is my executive and legislative assistant, and he did much of the heavy lifting on the consultation and the development of the text of this bill. My amazing team in the constituency office, Dulce Santos, Hanan Harb, Leslie Ellis, and Kyra Brennan, engaged our community in Mississauga Lakeshore and supported us each step of the way. And, Madam Chair, I would also like to thank Strength in Stories. This is a grassroots organization that helped to inspire this bill, and particularly its co-founder, Rochelle Bergen. In addition, local and national stakeholders, such as non-profit organizations, women's shelters, and all levels of government provided feedback that was critical in developing the preambular paragraphs of this bill. My team and I felt that making frank and compelling mention of the full scope of gender-based inequalities that persist in Canada was an essential step to ensure that Gender Equality Week will be effective in delivering two things: national engagement and prospective solutions. And the reason for this, Madam Chair, is simple. Solving any given problem first requires full recognition of the existence of the problem and of its scope. We need to be able to call problems by their names and be frank and open when tackling the challenges that we continue to face. Je suis sûr que les membres de ce comité ne se surprendront.
I am sure that the members of this committee will not be surprised to hear stakeholders tell them that we still have a lot to do to establish a society that is founded on gender equality. I would like to tell you some facts that back that up. In the Global Report on Gender Disparities, published every year since 2006, the World Economic Forum shows the breadth of gender inequality, as well as efforts made to eliminate that inequality, specifically in areas such as health, education, economic participation, economic possibilities, and political empowerment. According to the 2016 report published by the Forum last October, Canada is 35th out of 144 countries between Luxembourg and Cape Verde, but it is at the highest level in North America. Madam Chair, distinguished members of the committee, we must also recognize as Canadians that the wage gap between men and women hurts our economy and the global economy. Everywhere in the world, we are increasingly recognizing that gender inequality causes economic problems of great breadth. According to a report published in 2005 by the Royal Bank, the wage gap causes Canadian women to lose approximately $126 billion every year. In a report published last October by UBS Management, an investment company, the report stated that world economic revenues would increase by 10 trillion pounds if we ended the wage gap. A McKinsey Global Institute report stated in 2015 that by increasing gender equality, we would add 12 trillion pounds to the world GDP by 2025.
Can work to achieve what more and more international organizations and governments around the world are advocating: that the elimination of gender gaps will lead to strong and lasting economic benefits. As a 2013 International Monetary Fund report on women's participation in the global labour market put it, the challenges of growth, job creation, and inclusion are closely intertwined. Here in Canada, gender-based inequalities have become ingrained in the fabric of our society, and if we do not address them directly, they will continue to persist. Canadians of minority gender identity and expression are often faced with these challenges in an even more profound manner. And on the predicament of Indigenous Canadians, Madam Chair, a 2015 RCMP report outlined that Indigenous women make up just over 4% of our population and yet account for 16% of female homicides and 11% of missing Canadian women. The acknowledgement of these outcomes goes far beyond partisan affiliation. All of us bear some responsibility in a society that categorically and systematically treats and values genders differently. In short, if we truly seek to address these challenges, a pivotal first step is to recognize them frankly and understand them fully. Secondly, the federal government cannot solve these problems by itself. Gender equality requires awareness and engagement on the part of all Canadians. And to be clear, I'm very proud of the leadership of our Prime Minister and of the federal government who are working to address systemic gender-based gaps that have shaped Canada since Confederation. Le Premier ministre a établi la parité homme-femme au cabinet pour la...
Prime Minister has created gender parity within cabinet for the first time in Canada's history. And for the first time, a woman has become leader of the government in the House, and a minister has been appointed to consider matters of gender equality. The government has also started an inquiry on missing and murdered Aboriginal women. Moreover, the Minister for the Status of Women is creating a federal strategy on sexist violence. The government has also started using gender-based analysis, GBA, in all federal departments to ensure that these matters be taken into consideration in all government programs, policies, and legislation. The Government of Canada has tabled Bill C-16, which is currently in the Senate, which protects minority gender expression or identity Canadians by adding gender identity or gender expression to the list of illegitimate grounds for discrimination in the Canadian Human Rights Act. At the beginning of December 2016, the Governor of the Bank of Canada, the Department of Finance, the Minister of Finance, and the Minister of Status of Women have announced that Viola Desmond, a businesswoman and champion of civil rights from Nova Scotia, will be the first woman on a Canadian bill. Internationally, Canada has seized the occasion to be on the United Nations Commission for the Status of Women and is supporting the He for She campaign, also sponsored by the UN. Once again, I would like to congratulate our Prime Minister and the Government of Canada when it comes to promoting gender equality.
The cause on which all Canadians must lead. This is really the thrust of the bill before you today. Government cannot do this work alone, and the mere passage of legislation without public recognition of and engagement with the challenges we face will be insufficient. You may rightly wonder what exactly an annual Gender Equality Week might look like. Each year, across the 338 federal ridings in our country, Gender Equality Week can inspire girls, boys, men, women, and those of minority gender identity and expression to take part in a dialogue to establish a more inclusive society. If we work together, Madam Chair, we can find solutions. As parliamentarians, we can use this designated week to deepen relationships and collaborate with our community leaders and advocacy groups. This work could take the form of community town halls and debates, research proposals, television and social media reports, fundraising initiatives, marches, art and music, and other forms of advocacy. Through its emphasis on fostering local, community-based dialogue, Gender Equality Week can also serve to strengthen current federal initiatives in communities across our country. In my riding of Mississauga Lakeshore, young people as well as seniors have participated in the development of the bill that is before you today. Members of our Youth Council have specifically expressed concern about the difficulties faced by women to enter and excel in the workforce. Leaders in our community of seniors could play a big part in an annual Gender Equality Week. They have seen firsthand how attitudes and policies have and have not changed with respect to gender equality, and their input would be critical to eliminating gender-based disparities, including poverty, for the next generation and beyond. Madam Chair, our great country is celebrating its 150th anniversary this year. Canada has achieved so much since Confederation, and yet on the issue of gender equality and equity, there's still so much more to achieve. Bill C-309, an Act to Establish Gender Equality Week, is an effort to raise collective awareness of existing gender-based inequalities and to work towards the establishment of a more inclusive society. We need to be able to identify problems in a frank manner and understand that governments cannot solve the issues alone. This is an effort on which we must all lead, and we have before us an opportunity to achieve real progress in our communities and across our country. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I look forward to the committee's questions.
Thank you very much. We'll begin our first round of questioning with my colleague, Ms. Dusseret.
I'll be switching my time with Mr. Fraser. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Spangman, for appearing today, but more importantly for putting forward this interesting and exciting private members bill. One of the things that I've found striking in my experience on this committee, and although there are some notable exceptions, is it's striking how little men and boys are engaged in the discussion of gender equality. And I see a huge opportunity for men to take a leadership role in partnership with the women who've been championing gender equality for their careers. Can you perhaps elaborate on how having a Gender Equality Week can help provide a platform to engage men and boys in championing equality as well, or potentially educating young men and boys in the importance of their role in promoting equality in Canadian society?
Absolutely, and thank you very much for the question, and thank you for support of this bill at first and second reading. It is absolutely critical. Not only can governments not do it alone, but women can't do it alone. So men have to stand by the side of women on each aspect of this very complex issue that we have before us, and it does go all the way back to elementary school education. When I was first approached by one of the co-inspirators of the bill, the question was, can we do something in the field of education to put Gender Equality Week in primary and secondary school programming. That was a provincial issue, so I wasn't able to address it directly as a federal member of parliament, but the discussion then evolved to creating this project before you, Gender Equality Week, where through the declaration of a week, we can indeed inspire, we can't prescribe, but we can certainly inspire education to come online during that 1 week, and to make sure that all the way from the elementary level onwards, there are projects, there are focused discussions during that week on the issue of gender equality. Starting at a young age is very important. And there are other challenges, and I alluded to it in my discussion with respect to just economic opportunity. I think that in itself is an opportunity to bring men into the discussion in a substantively focused way, because the financial industry itself is male-dominated. And a recognition of the economic opportunity to create pay equity, for example, globally in the trillions of dollars, really is one vehicle by which to broaden the conversation to bring men to the table. So those are just two aspects. There's many others.
Excellent. And I noticed in the preamble of the bill and during your remarks this morning as well, you focused a little bit on sort of different sectors of the Canadian society, like Indigenous women, for an example. Could you explain perhaps how the intersectional nature of gender inequality could be remedied with the celebration of a Gender Equality Week?
I'm not sure I mean, it's very aspirational to talk about remedies right away, but I think what you're pointing to really is the opportunity to raise awareness. Not just on the part of men and boys, but to raise awareness of non-Indigenous Canadians, of the plight of our Indigenous population, and specifically Indigenous women. Some of that is making its way into curricula, into education, and again, education is the starting point, but also more broadly across society, to recognize that there are groups of women, Indigenous women being one of them, new Canadians of insular ethnocultural minorities being another, women seniors being a third group, that are even more profoundly affected by gender inequality than women at large. So I think that's very important, to really drill down into the details and develop some very concrete solutions for these sub-problems. And I think the GBA Plus initiative, the gender-based analysis that is now practiced in the federal government, is a very important step towards that goal.
One of the other items that you mentioned that resonates very well with me is the fact that Viola Desmond will be featured on the $10 bill. Just by coincidence, the incident that gave rise to her her becoming a human rights icon in Canada took place in my hometown in New Glasgow. One of the things that I think is important, but perhaps understated, is the fact that symbolic gestures by a federal government or by members of society can actually lead to positive social change. Can you perhaps explain how either a Gender Equality Week or initiatives like putting a Canadian woman on currency can actually lead to a shift in attitudes over time in Canadian society?
Symbolism matters deeply. It's symbolism combined with action, really, that will provide the solutions. And it should be habitual that we see leading women on our Canadian symbols. And this is a very, very good start to have put the first Canadian woman on a banknote. It was absolutely well overdue, but necessary in a very deep sense to make progress. But it's not just symbolism. It's more than that. It's really looking, and this is where the 338 federal ridings come into play, right? This is really an opportunity for all of us around the table and all our colleagues in the House of Commons to look at our constituency, to see what symbols we have historically, locally, and what symbols we can still create, but then combine that with really concrete pathways to action. It may, as I said in my remarks, it may involve a protest, it may result in research by graduate students being profiled during Gender Equality Week on some of the data gaps that we have. I think that's another very important aspect of this bill that I didn't touch upon in my opening remarks, but we are missing some data, especially on the minority populations of women that are facing specific challenges.
Just very quickly then, as a final question as we wrap up here, the region that I represent is characterized by small towns and rural communities. Equality initiatives tend to benefit from the size of a population in a big urban center. What can small communities do to help celebrate gender equality during the week, assuming that this bill becomes law?
Again, it's up to us as federal parliamentarians to take some initiative to work with our organizers, our community leaders in small communities to see what can be done physically. Social media is a great tool, but it's not limited to social media. And even small communities now have reach through various channels of communication and through Parliament itself and our provincial legislatures to be profiled more broadly and nationally. So I think that is very, very important work, that there isn't going to be a rural-urban divide on the issue of gender equality.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
All right. And so we'll go to my colleague, Ms. Vecchio, for 7 minutes.
Thanks very much, and thank you very much for this bill. I will be supporting this bill, but there's a few things that I just want to get some data and information on. And so when we're looking at the preamble, on page 1, line 24 through 29, you indicate, whereas the effects of poverty and vulnerability are exacerbated by limited access for women and their families to affordable housing. If you could give me data on that, I recognize it is an issue because they're dealing with different issues, but what exactly are you referring to as limited access?
Thank you very much for that question, Ms. Vecchio, and thank you also for your support for this bill at first and second reading. As you can appreciate, the private member's bill is not an opportunity to do exhaustive research. Data is very important, and we've really very carefully developed a set of preambles that is supported by data, but that also doesn't become too statistically driven. And it's open for interpretation and open for emphasis, again, in our various writings, depending on what initiatives we like to pursue during Gender Equality Week. This information actually came to us from Women's College Hospital. I can certainly provide the exact written feedback from that group to the committee if that's helpful. The focus there was primarily, but not exclusively, mental health, access to mental health.
Absolutely, that would be, but would we find the same access? Yeah, send that us our way, that would be wonderful. I want to go on to page 2. We're looking at page 2, line 8 and 9. And just, I would look at this, whereas Canadian women face barriers in pursuing and completing post-secondary education. Just looking at that specific part. Now, the testimony that we have heard through our study is we're showing that 61% of post-secondary graduates in Canada are actually women. And we also are showing that we are seeing an increase in levels of people going into their master's and PhD as well. But what are these barriers that you're showing, yet we see that the statistics do not support that? So can you provide the data or the research that you have on that, please?
Absolutely. There's two aspects to that. First of all, this preambular paragraph really is aimed at the STEM field, and I think the data there is strongly supported and strongly out there. But the other aspect of this was that this was a preambular paragraph that captured comments from our Indigenous women. Access to education is a particular, not just access, but completing post-secondary education is a particular aspect in the North. We chose not to narrow it in the preamble to Indigenous women to make sure that we capture the STEM side of it as well.
Okay.
But it pivots to both STEM and Indigenous communities in the far North.
Okay.
And there the problem is particularly completion
Okay.
of post-secondary education.
For Indigenous,
Yes.
specific. Okay. Line 2, or page 2, line 18 through 23, we're talking about obstacles where women are not being recognized for their prior work when they come as newcomers. Is there data showing that newcomer men have better access than newcomer women? Is that what you were getting at? Or
No, it's not. Thank you for that question. It's very important. It isn't really, we don't necessarily, we didn't want to line this always up as a disparity vis-a-vis men. I mean, yes, the discussion is about inequality, but this is simply net obstacles that Canadian women immigrants face when it comes to the professions. And we recognize that this is a provincial problem in many respects because these are self-regulatory bodies that accredit, but the obstacle exists and we're reaching out broadly to Canadians. So we did want to include it in the preambles.
Okay. And page 2, line 27 and 30, you've got a quote here, whereas Canadian women are underrepresented as participants and leaders in sports and physical activities, which affects their health and sense of social inclusion. I recognize that this can be a barrier. Many times the choices of young girls and boys, or young girls I should say, I'm sorry, but do you have, how does this underrepresentation of women in sports and physical activities affect the health and social inclusion of women? Can you give me a little bit more insight on that, please?
Yes, and I think it's really, what you're pointing to there is, it came in part from the Canadian Association for the Advancement of Women in Sport and Physical Activity. Leadership positions in sport are particularly an issue, and we can certainly provide the information that we received from that organization.
Can you also show data, because I think that we have seen such an increase as well in the women's participation, whether it's our World Cup soccer teams, all of those things. We've seen a huge increase in women in participation in sport. I know that we have seen a greater access for women when it comes to opportunities for them to take part in NCAA sports as well. We have many Canadian athletes who are going down to the United States to play in sports because the fact that you can't have the same, you don't get the same granting as you would here in Canada, or as you do in Canada. So there's things there. I'm just trying to look at the data because maybe it's because my family is so focused on sports. I see that we don't have those issues.
No, and I appreciate that, and we all recognize the tremendous outcomes and achievements by our Canadian women athletes. I mean, there's no question about that. There is also, going back to Mr. Fraser's comment, there is a rural-urban divide in access to sport, and there's also a poverty-related gap that may be specifically disproportionate for women that are heads of single households, and ensuring that young girls in those households have full access. I think that's part of the issue there, but we'll certainly provide clarification.
That would be wonderful. If you don't mind, I wouldn't mind going back to page 1, line 19 through 23. I'm just looking at line 19 through 23 and comparing it to line 15 through 23 kind of thing. You've got those intersecting. Can you just be a little bit more, I kind of see these two in the preamble being more merged. Can you tell me why they are separated? Those two thoughts?
With respect to poverty and inequality?
Whereas poverty and inequality is proportional. Yes, you've got that section.
Yep.
And then it continues on about the sexual orientation that's already been discussed in the transgender. So
no, that's a fair point. I think that second preambular paragraph around line 20 really goes to isolation, social isolation and vulnerability, rather than just poverty and economic inequality. So okay. They're two separate issues in our mind.
And carrying on with, I mean, like again, I said I would be supporting this. What is it that you think, at the end of the day, we do have the Day of the Girl, we do have a variety of different initiatives that we put forward, not only as an opposition, but as this government as well. Why do you think, what sort of impact do you think this week will actually have? If you don't mind sharing that.
Absolutely, and thank you for that question. And that's a question that's pervasive throughout the discussion. Two things. The first one is that this is not a celebratory bill. It was initially mischaracterized by some as being celebratory. It's not a bill where we hold up achievements of Canadian women, although we recognize them, and you'll find some language in that bill. The primary aspiration of this bill is to call the problem what it is, to be really frank and upfront with respect to the challenges, even to the point of being crass. That's quite intentional. And through that approach, I think it's really something that the bill will do that other celebratory days like International Women's Day or Day of the Girl, which are more celebratory in nature, will not achieve, will not accomplish. But the other thing is really that it, through that, what you could call as a fairly provocative approach, it seeks to engage all Canadians.
Thank you. And now we'll go to my colleague, Ms. Malcolmson, for 7 minutes.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to Mr. Spiegelman for the bill. I appreciated your caveat that this isn't meant to be celebratory. However, there's nothing in the bill that says that. I'm going to propose to the committee that we call this Gender Equality Action Week, so I'd be interested to know if your focus is actually on taking action, then I'd be interested to know whether that's something that you would consider. So you say that in your introduction, you said governments cannot do this work alone, and that is true. I would argue that the frontline organizations and the women's movement, especially during the Conservative decade in power, really carried the work of gender equality, and we're also recognizing an enormous hole in federal government action. And I think you were in the House when I gave my speech, and you know that I supported your bill at second reading, but I'm discouraged that despite the very stark list in the preamble that you outline, you ring the alarm on all kinds of issues facing women, the cost of the economy of violence, the continued pay gap, the lack of pay of childcare, the violence for Indigenous women, and on and on and on. You raise this huge, ring this huge alarm, but the remedy is so minute. So I'd like to ask why you didn't take a more prescriptive approach. So we've had a motion in the House a year ago committing to implement pay equity, proactive pay equity legislation. The committee recommended that the government table that legislation this coming June. We've had the government say late 2018. So can I ask what's your view on implementation of pay equity legislation as a way to actually take that federal leadership on gender equality, and what should the timeline be in your view?
Ms. Malcolmson, thank you very much. There's a number of questions embedded in what you've said, but thank you for your advocacy, for your championship, and also for supporting the bill at first and second reading. I'm grateful. Should it be Gender Equality Action Week? Let me take that question first. I think ideally at the outcome of each annual Gender Equality Week, there will be a set of actions, actionable items, or even real progress that can be identified. It is action as much as it is awareness. It's reaching out to all Canadians. It's going all the way to the elementary school level, if not even earlier, and saying to Canadians, here are some issues, and unless you get engaged, that's the soft message, unless you get engaged as Canadians, we are going to have a problem legislating our way to success. So what I was hoping for to really is giving the public some levers to put pressure on us through the pathway of raising awareness and through the pathway of identifying solutions. And I would like to see nothing further than communities to get engaged on the issue of pay equity, to have some marches, to have some protests even, to have some academic works that underscore with additional data as needed just how profound the gaps are, but as we saw on the economic side, also how significant the opportunities are if we make actual progress. You'll appreciate that this is a private member's bill. It's not something that'll have financial implications, and nor would I purport to speak for the government, which has its own executive programs and agenda. With respect to pay equity, absolutely. I see it as a human right, and I think progress on pay equity will be extremely welcome. And I think the government is in the process of working on the issue. And I mean, how could we not champion it? But what I'm seeking to do through this private members initiative is to make sure that across the country we have greater awareness on the pay equity gap, on the opportunity, and through that we basically generate fertile ground for government action to actually connect with Canadians and to solve this issue fully, rather than just in a top-down.
I would argue that the public's had lots of opportunity to protest for pay equity. It's been 40 years, and we would really rather see the government lead on this so that the frontline organizations do not have to spend their time away from their clients and protesting instead. You flagged the fact about the low rate of women elected to Parliament, just 26% this year, even though women make up 50% plus of the population. How did my colleague Kennedy Stewart brought in a private member's bill intended to remedy, to create incentives for political parties to get more women on the ballot. So I'd like to know how you voted on that bill, which would have provided a tool to bring more gender balance to Parliament.
I'm not somebody who's in favor of quotas, either at the party level or nationally. I've worked in jurisdictions with the United Nations.
Respect, it wasn't a quota bill.
Well, but you know, legislating outcomes basically, right? Prescribing outcomes in terms of.
You know that's not what it said.
That's something I don't favor. What I favor, and through this initiative, it's reflected in this initiative, is that we really empower men to step to the side of women, so that we get more women, not just on the ballot as a net outcome, but more women wanting to run and being able to run. Right. So there are initiatives like the Scottish government, for example, has put forward an initiative to make sure that men have the ability or will enter into primary caregiving roles in early childhood much more easily than they do at the moment, empowering women to actually step forward and seek political office, not because we need more women in Parliament, but because they want to be on the ballot, they want to serve, and they want to have the opportunity.
And do you
so
believe
it's more of a bottom-up approach.
Your bill gives that opportunity to women more than the private member's bill that my colleague brought forward, which would have given parties incentives to nominate more women for the voters to choose from?
Again, my approach is a bottom-up approach, which is really empowering women as a society to take that step, rather than parties saying we will have more women, on our slate. The top-down approach has to be met by a bottom-up approach to actually empower women, not just empower them, but actually make them want to run, not because a party calls them and says, we'd really like you to, and there's nobody else, and please run, but because she feels that this is the right thing to do and that she should be enabled to serve when she wants to. I think that those two have to meet, those two approaches.
This committee recommended gender-based analysis legislation be tabled in Parliament by this coming June. The government has said now they're not sure at all when or if that will happen, certainly not this year. What's your view on legislating gender-based analysis as an action to get gender equality?
Well, look, I'm proud of what the government's done so far. I'm very proud that my office, all staff, all 6 of us have completed gender-based analysis training. We continue to advocate it. It's absolutely critical that policy outcomes reflect gender-based analysis. Anybody who looks at this program, this particular training course, will consider it to be a no-brainer. I can't speak for the government in terms of timelines of legislating it. But again, my point is, with this entire initiative, is that we cannot legislate ourselves to success unless we have broad public awareness, and in some cases quite willingly invite more public pressure than we've had in the past.
Excellent. Well, wonderful. Now we turn to our clause-by-clause review. And because we have a number of committee members who are new, and this may be your first time going through it, I would make a few comments just to instruct you. Now, for those of you that didn't read the 1,200-page standing order book and have it committed to memory, when we do a clause-by-clause review, it's important to note that unless substantive changes are made to the clause, you cannot edit the preamble or the short title. So as we go down, pursuant to Standing Order 75-1, we will leave the preamble until we see whether or not there are any changes to the clauses, and similarly for the short title as well.
I'd like to invite the representative.
And I would invite the representatives from Status of Women to join us. We have Nancy Jean Waugh and Pamela Murphy. And as we go along, if there are questions that arise that they can give input to, that would be appreciated. So the first amendment that we will consider is Lib 1. You do have a package. Oh, Ms. Demoff.
I have a question for you. My understanding is that you can't amend the bill by adding clauses which are not fundamentally part of what the House has already passed.
That is true. You cannot do that. And if you have amendments that are brought in for a specific clause, and there are more than one amendment that are submitted, they are addressed in the order they come in. And so the first one that you consider, if it's moved and accepted, then you can't consider the others. So there's some rules like that as we go through that you'll see.
But in terms of adding additional clauses to the bill, they can't change the fundamental...
They can't change the fundamental scope of the bill.
Okay.
Okay? And so if you take your package and you look at Lib 1, this was moved by Monsieur Serret throughout Canada, and each and every year, the fourth week in September is to be known as Gender Equality Week. Monsieur Serret, do you have some comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the proposed here change, essentially in October, is currently celebrating Women's History Month in Canada, which also includes International Day of the Girl in October. So basically here, the proposed amendment, as the Chair read, is looking at that the Bill C-309 in Clause 2 be amended and replaced with line 17, 18 on page 3 with the following. Throughout Canada in each of every year, the fourth week of September be known as Gender Equality Week. So just wanted to make that change.
Very good. And just to note that the Lib 1 amendment is consequential to the Lib 2. So if you vote on Lib 1, that vote applies also to Lib 2. And Lib 2 basically would amend the preamble because the preamble says first week of October. So if you decide it's going to be first week or last week of September, then that would also go into the preamble. Okay, discussion on that amendment. All in favor of that amendment? Opposed? All right. Then Lib 1 is carried, as is Lib 2. The next amendment to be considered is NDP 1. And this was brought forward by Ms. Malcolmson. Throughout Canada, in each and every year, starting in the calendar year following, that in which the Government of Canada implements proactive pay equity legislation. Ms. Malcolmson.
This is something that I brought up in my speech in the House, and on the theme of let's have this tied to action. I reference some input that we had from United Steelworkers. They said it is nice to have a week dedicated to thinking about the issue, but far better for women and girls to be able to enjoy gender equality throughout the entire year because there are programs and structures in place to ensure gender equality and fight misogyny and patriarchy, end quote. That's the United Steelworkers. So I recommend that, given that the government says that they're going to do this, that we tie the celebration of the week and gender equality with something to celebrate, and this would make the bill come into effect once legislation has been tabled.
And so according to our legislative clerk, because we adopted Lib 1, and this is then affecting the same clause, the question on NDP 1 cannot be put because it conflicts with Lib 1. And so we move then to NDP 2. Now, NDP 2, also proposed by Ms. Malcolmson, that Bill C-309 in Clause 2 be amended by replacing line 19 on page 3 with the following. That would be called Action Week. And so I would just inform you that if we do adopt this amendment, that the preamble would also have to be fixed because then the name would change there as well, and that's NDP 6. So discussion, comments from you, Ms. Malcolmson, on NDP 2?
Thank you. Yeah, as again referenced, it sounds as if the sponsor of the bill is intending this to be not celebratory, but around action and encouraging action and mobilizing communities. So I think that this might make this look less emblematic and more leading to actual outcomes. And I reference input that I got from Joyce Arthur, who's Executive Director of the Abortion Rights Coalition of Canada, ARC. She says one possible suggestion to make it more effective and less symbolic, change it to Action for Gender Equality Week or Gender Equality Action Week.
Discussion on this amendment? Mr. Fraser.
When this testimony came up during Mr. Spengman's line of questioning with Ms. Malcolmson, it seemed that it was as much about awareness as it was about specific action. And one of the things that I know he raised as well was some hesitancy around the fact that this is a private member's bill, and if we started prescribing that the government has to take action, it could lead to a potential requirement for spending, which would potentially open up a debate about royal recommendation. And I think I would hate to see this bill rejected for sort of a loose reference to spending. So for that reason, I'd rather that we remain with the current name, Gender Equality Week, to avoid the potential that this motion would have unintended consequences that could cause the bill to die.
Further discussion on the amendment? Ms. Malcolmson.
I'll just say to my colleague, Mr. Fraser, I think that is highly imaginative thinking. I mean, there's lots of places, absolutely, that we have to be cautious about a private member's bill having financial consequences. We've seen lots of stuff come through the House and be supported by all parties that have had less financial implications than adding the word action in there. And I would suggest that although I support the emblematic changes that this government has made, that I have lobbied for, getting women on banknotes, gender-balanced cabinet, this government risks the tag, which is already getting at the grassroots movement, of being all talk and no action. And I would think that we would all do better if we were clear that this is not another only emblematic gesture, but is one that encourages and supports action at all levels.
Further discussion? Mr. Fraser.
Aside from sort of the potential procedural hiccup that I mentioned, I think substantively that the bill is not just about action, but also about sort of raising awareness and not. I think ideally it would lead to action, but the testimony that we heard was that the awareness piece is as important as the action. So for that reason, I'd prefer we remain with the current name.
Mr. Moff.
It appears Mr. Spengelman wants to say something.
Oh, very good. Mr. Spengelman. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't sure what the protocol was to chime in, but thank you for the opportunity. It is action, it is awareness, but it is not government action. This bill actually aims to engage Canadians. And if you look at the second last preambular paragraph, the one that goes from the bottom of page 2 to page 3, it calls on Canadians to mark the week with events and initiatives to address the challenges. So action, yes, but action on the part of Canadians less than government, because we really want to stress the point that this is not something that government can solely succeed in legislating. We need Canadians to be engaged, and that's what the bill aims to achieve.
Very good. I would call the question then. All in favor of NDP 2 amendment? Opposed? All right, so NDP 2 is not carried, which also means that NDP 6 is not carried. All right, so now those are all of the amendments that were brought forward that have to do with Clause 2. So the question before us is, shall Clause 2 carry as amended by Lib 1? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, it's carried. All right, there are suggestions about a new clause. If we go to NDP 3, Ms. Malcolmson, that we amend with quite a substantive clause. Would you like to comment on that?
This is in the same vein as discussed before, that to link this to action and the responsibility and the power that the federal government has but has not used. Legislated pay equity and gender-based analysis legislation. So this being, again, sort of a government taking the ability to review progress on those files and to report back to Parliament whether there has been action in these areas, whether there have been measurable successes. And again, fitting into the theme of this being something that we can actually say that there's something that has been measurable. On this area, I got a note from United Steelworkers saying we would rather see concrete, effective programs on issues like pay equity, affordable universal childcare, a national action plan on violence against women, and action to end poverty and homelessness for women and children. I think the measures bring some accountability and measurability to follow in with that grassroots advice.
Very good. And per the legislative clerk, I see that the NDP 3 is inadmissible because it's beyond the scope of the bill. It's calling for action on the part of the government on something that was outside of the scope of the clause. So that is not admissible. We won't be voting on that one. NDP 4. Again, Ms. Malcolmson, if you want to make a comment about NDP 4.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. So here's a suggestion from West Coast Leaf. Legislation and other actions like Bill C-309 not only do very little to address inequality in the everyday lives of women in Canada, but they also create a risk of misleading the public into thinking that the federal government is taking substantive action when they have little potential to create meaningful change, meaning a Gender Equality Week. West Coast Leaf strongly encourages the government to take more substantive action that will create meaningful change in the lives of women. So my amendment here recommending that there be a conference with all provincial representatives and stakeholders to review issues and actions taken that are related to achieving proactive pay equity and promoting gender-based analysis legislation, again, creates that transparency, that measurability, and that ongoing review of real action towards achieving gender equality.
And so, per the legislative clerk, the NDP 4 is also inadmissible because it's beyond the scope of the bill in the clause. We turn then to the preamble, NDP 5. Ms. Malcolmson, again, it's a rewrite, I believe, of the preamble, if you would like a few minutes to go through that.
So this, recognize that the preamble doesn't actually change, the only action in the legislation is the establishment of the Gender Equality Week. However, the list of areas in which women are not equal and human rights have not been respected in relation to Canada's commitments internationally around gender equality. The list is so complete that we did get some feedback from stakeholders that there are some missing pieces. So one is women's rights are fundamental human rights. Another, that Canadians are committed to safe as well as reliable sexual and reproductive health care access and access to abortion. Another, that Canada is a signatory to the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, adopted in the United Nations General Assembly in 1979, and that the Government of Canada reiterated its commitment to implement all recommendations of the Convention. That the government had committed to implement the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, adopted in 1995. That Canada is a signatory to the Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women, adopted at the UN in 1993, and that the government has supported the and supports the 2016 Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women report. Second last one is that the Parliament of Canada recognizes that the principles set out in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and in particular those in Articles 21 and 22, should be enshrined in the laws of Canada. That has also been a government commitment. And whereas Canada has long recognized the importance of women's rights long sought to address status issues, including those addressed by the Royal Commission on the Status of Women, established in 1967. I've got, especially on the UNDRIP commitment, the National Aboriginal Circle Against Family Violence wrote to me saying the preamble definitely needs a culturally relevant gender-based comparative analysis to make a real difference. The legislation ought to include the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, Articles 21 and 22. And also, I got a letter from Joyce Arthur, Executive Director of Abortion Rights Coalition of Canada, who wrote, I strongly recommend that an important addition be made to the preamble to recognize that Canadian women and LGBTQ persons are still being denied their reproductive rights because of lack of access to safe and fully funded abortion in their own communities and inadequate access to other sexual reproductive health care and information. So I guess in summary, I'll say you can't have it both ways. Either say the preamble is something that we're really proud of as in the way that it categorizes the problems and leaves some of these important partners and segments of our community that are not, that have suffered from gender inequality. To not have an exhaustive list, but then also to say, well, the preamble doesn't matter so much. Let's either make the list complete or else recognize that the only power in this bill is in fact in the one paragraph around establishment of the Gender Equality Week. Thank you.
Yes, and as you've said, because there is no change to the substantive part of the bill, which is the clause, then this change to the preamble is inadmissible. And we will move to CPC 1. And CPC 1, Ms. Vecchio.
Okay, thanks very much. I just kind of want to look at the lines. So if we're starting, let's look at by replacing lines 26 and 27 on page 1 with the following. What we've got is specifically social support programs and child care services. I would like to just see that broader, and by removing the term programs and services, so it would read families to affordable housing, social support, and child care, as well as by gaps in Canada's healthcare, and carry on. But just take out those words services and programs to make it a broader statement.
Okay. Similarly to the previous one, because there were no substantive amendments to the clause, the preamble cannot be, so that is also inadmissible. Lib 2 was previously. Oh, you can finish.
There's
okay.
2 more. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Looking at, and in respect to what Sven had brought forward, when we're looking at the, turning to page 2, when we're looking at the section as whereas Canadian women are physically, verbally, and emotionally abused, often faces challenges, that's going to be line 5 through 7. Just once again, removing the word programs after the word access to social support, keeping that broader. No? Yeah, I would just look at the clerk.
You can finish all of them and then
okay. And finally, when we're looking at, and Sven, you brought this up specifically, we've got that clause whereas Canadian women face barriers in pursuing and completing post-secondary education. When it is specifically to Indigenous, I can support it, but if you're going down into the section of line 14, 15, 16, 17, we do specifically indicate Indigenous women there, so there is a replication. So replication of thought. So where I'd like to see the line 8 through 12 read is whereas Canadian women face barriers in pursuing careers in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So removing the portion after barriers remove pursuing and completing post-secondary education, because I don't think that is correct. And you have to the next paragraph below, you have talked specifically about Indigenous.
All right, and so as I was saying, that because there was no substantive change to the clause, this preamble amendment is inadmissible. Lib 2 was already voted on. When we said we were going to change Gender Equality Week to the 4th week of September, then the preamble is also modified to reflect that, and so that was carried. We go now to the overall preamble. Shall the preamble carry as amended by Lib 2? All in favor? Opposed? We're voting on the preamble as amended with Lib 2. All in favor? And all opposed? Okay, so that's carried. In terms of the short title, there is NDP 6 that was consequential to NDP 2 to change the name to Gender Equality Action Week, which we previously voted on, so that one is not passing. And so shall the title carry as original? The short title. All in favor? Yep. And opposed. And so that's carried. And then the overall title, shall the title carry? All in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Shall the bill carry as amended? All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Shall I report the bill as amended to the House? All in favor? That is carried. And shall the committee order a reprint of the bill to put the amendments in? All in favor? Very good. And so that's a yes as well. And so that concludes the review. Congratulations to you, Mr. Spengeman.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you for the committee. I hope your first experience with bill review was delightful. We shall suspend momentarily so we can go in camera and continue to consider our report, since we have some time to do that.